Welcome to the Deep Dive. We sift through stacks of sources to bring you, well, crucial insights. And today, we're diving into one of those really enduring, deeply personal questions.
One of the big ones.
Yeah, exactly. Why does God allow so much suffering and evil in the world? I mean, it's a question that just echoes, doesn't it? Especially when hardship strikes.
It really does.
So our deep dive today is titled, God's Glory Amidst Suffering.
Our mission here, it really isn't about finding simple answers. Life's biggest questions rarely have those.
Right.
Instead, we're exploring, well, a multifaceted landscape here. Theological, psychological. We'll look at the core meaning of God's glory, then how people actually perceive suffering, how they wrestle with it, and crucially, how some biblical narratives connect these two things that seem, well, pretty far apart.
Glory and suffering.
Exactly. It's about getting a deeper understanding, really, not just a quick fix.
All right, let's unpack this then. Before we can even start connecting glory to suffering, we first need to get a handle on what God's glory actually means. It's a phrase, we hear a lot. But what's its actual weight?
That's a great place to start because the word itself, the main Hebrew word, kabod.
Kabod.
Yeah, kabod. It literally translates to weight or heaviness.
Weightiness.
Exactly. So theologically speaking, God's glory signifies the immense importance, the weightiness of his being, his attributes, his character.
Okay.
It's sort of the sum total, all his perfections, holiness, love, power, wisdom, goodness, but made manifest, shown.
Made manifest.
And we can kind of distinguish two aspects here. There's intrinsic glory. That's God's inherent internal perfection. It's just who he is, completely independent of creation or anything else.
Right, just God being God.
Precisely. Then there's extrinsic glory, and that's the external display or the communication of that intrinsic glory.
How it shows up.
Exactly. Through his actions in the world like creation, his ongoing care, what theologians call providence, and his redemptive work.
That distinction really helps clarify things. So intrinsic is who God is, extrinsic is how he reveals himself. Where do our sources say we actually see this extrinsic glory in action?
Well, the sources point to quite a few powerful biblical examples. First off, there's creation itself.
Right.
Psalm 19.1 puts it beautifully. The heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of his hands.
So the universe is like Exhibit A?
You could say that, yeah. The sheer scale, the complexity, it points to his power, his magnificence. Then, in the Old Testament, you see these moments of the manifestation of his presence.
Like the pillar of cloud and fire.
Exactly that, guiding the Israelites in Exodus. Or think about the glory filling the tabernacle, and later the temple. Exodus 40, 1 Kings 8 describe it. These were like tangible signs of his presence and power.
Okay, very direct.
Then moving into the New Testament, Jesus Christ is presented as the ultimate revelation of God's glory.
The ultimate one.
Yeah. John 1.14 says, "We have seen his glory of the one and only Son." And Hebrews 1.3, it calls Jesus the radiance of the glory of God. His life, his miracles, his resurrection, it's all portrayed as a display of divine glory.
Wow.
And finally, even the purpose of humanity is tied into this. Isaiah 43.7 states, "God created people for my glory."
Pure his glory.
Right. And Romans 3.23 kind of implies that our original design was to reflect God's glory, and sin is essentially failing to do that, falling short.
It's astounding to see it framed that way. Glory shown in the cosmos, in history, in Jesus, even in our very purpose. So if that's his glory being displayed, what's our part? How are we supposed to, engage with something that immense?
That's the other side of the coin. Our sources talk about this as the human response, or sometimes ascribed glory, how we as humans give glory back to God.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Primarily, it involves praise and worship, which is really just recognizing and acknowledging God's inherent worth, his value.
Makes sense.
It also means obedience and righteous living, so actively trying to demonstrate God's character to the world around us. 1 Corinthians 10.31 says, "So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God."
Everything.
It's about living out his values in, pretty much every action. And finally, it involves sharing the gospel, telling others about God's glory, his saving acts. It's meant to be a comprehensive response touching all parts of life.
Okay, we've laid out this really rich theological understanding of God's glory, intrinsic and extrinsic, and our response. Now, here's where it gets, really interesting, maybe even challenging. How do these deep concepts actually play out in the real world? What do people really believe and experience, especially when suffering hits? Does this theological framework connect?
That's the crucial bridge, isn't it? And, it's important to say up front, researching God's glory, specifically with stats, is tough. Surveys don't usually ask, do you believe in God's glory? Like that.
Right. They ask about related things.
Exactly. They measure belief in God, maybe the importance of religion, purpose in life, those kinds of things.
Okay, so let's start with the most basic one. Belief in God. Is that still common? What do the numbers say?
Oh, it's definitely widespread, though there's nuance. Pew Research Center, this was 2023, found that a huge majority, 9 out of 10 U.S. adults, believe in God or some kind of higher power.
By 9 out of 10. Wow.
Yeah, but digging into that, 54% say they believe in God as described in the Bible, but another 34% believe in some other higher power or spiritual force. So there's belief, but different kinds.
Interesting distinction. So general belief is high, but what about connecting that to life's purpose? You mentioned that. Our sources seem to suggest there's a bit of a disconnect there.
You picked up on that, yes, and this part is really striking. A 2020 study, this one by the Cultural Research Center, found 86% of Americans believe there is a universal purpose for human life. Most people think life has meaning.
Okay, that's high too.
It is, but here's the kicker. Only 18%, just 18% of all U.S. adults believe that purpose is specifically knowing, loving, and serving God.
Only 18%.
Yeah.
Even with 90% believing in God or a higher power.
Exactly. And even among people who identify as Christians, only 38% said their purpose was knowing, loving, and serving God.
That's quite a gap.
It really highlights a disconnect, doesn't it, between a general belief in God and connecting life's ultimate purpose to, well, glorifying him in that specific theological sense we discussed.
That is truly insightful. Okay, so given that gap, when suffering inevitably hits because it does and people are facing hard times, who do they tend to blame or what do they think is going on?
Right. Pew Research looked into this too back in 2021, and it shows most people don't primarily point the finger at God. Yeah. A big majority, 80% of believers, actually say most suffering comes from people's own actions, human choices, mistakes.
Okay, that makes sense. What else?
Another really common view, held by 86% of all U.S. adults, is that random chance plays a big role. Sometimes bad things just happen.
Right, just the randomness of life.
But interestingly, about half of all U.S. adults, it's 56% among believers, they also endorse the idea that God chooses not to stop the suffering in the world because it is part of a larger plan.
Ah, so there is a sense of divine purpose in it for many, even if it's mysterious.
Exactly. It points to a belief in a purposeful, though maybe inscrutable, divine plan behind things. A much smaller group, only 4%, believe suffering is mainly punishment from God. That view isn't very widespread.
So it's complex. People see human actions, randomness, maybe a divine plan, but not so much direct punishment. Given all this suffering, then, does it tend to shake people's faith? Do people abandon belief, or do they find ways to cope?
Well, the data suggests that widespread abandonment of faith because of suffering isn't really the norm. That same Pew study found that anger with God is actually quite rare. 48% said they never get angry with God about suffering, and another 26% said rarely.
So most people aren't shaking their fist at the sky.
Apparently not, statistically speaking.